Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 130. I'm Phil. Those of you who have been...
Sorry,
What?
It sounded like you were trying to remember. That was a very...
I am. It's been a while since I've
I was
presented.
going to say, that was a very... I've had 2 months off intro.
Yeah, I was trying to, remember what I should be saying. But yeah, I'm Phil. Back once again, presenting an episode.
With the Renegade Master.
With my good friend and co-host, the Renegade Master. How are you doing?
That's what I insist on being referred to as from now on. That or an agent of chaos.
Either works.
I'm all right. Work is a lot currently. Haven't had a proper day off in a little while. To borrow a phrase from your book, I'm a bit tired. A little bit tired, Phil. How are you?
I'm a little bit tired. I'm fine, actually. I'm fine. I am cracking on with life.
Good.
As best I can.
That's what life is there for, to be cracked on with.
Yeah, like an egg.
Sure, yeah. Can I offer you a life in this trying times?
That's the worst time to have a life, I think.
That's true.
In trying times.
Oh, it's already so many obscure references. Please don't turn off. I promise this is going to get relevant really soon.
In about 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Our film this week is a patron request, actually.
It is.
Which I think may be one of our first. I don't think it's our first, but...
It's definitely not the first one. However, it has taken us about a year and a half to actually get round to it. So I would like to offer a very sincere apology.
Each time, I'm glad I haven't mentioned it, because each time we've started to do this film, we've had it lined up. We've done it, I think this is the 3rd time we've tried to do this film.
Some sort of fuckery occurs that means we have to delay it, but we're doing it. And if anything happens...
I'm just glad I haven't mentioned it to Ali, because...
I'm just throwing it out there now. If internet gremlins, happen and something goes wrong with this audio, I'm not doing it again. This is a one and done, and I never want to talk about this film ever again.
Interesting.
No, that might be misleading.
Huh. I'm curious now. I'm very curious.
You are a curious fellow.
So, this film is Martin, as I'm sure you know, having clicked on this episode, presumably. It is George Romero, one of his few non-zombie movies.
Well, you say that, but I actually took a bit of a trawl through his back catalogue, and there is more non-zombie stuff than I had initially realised.
Interesting. I guess that's what he's known for, though, isn't it?
I was about to say that's what he did best, but I'm not sure I agree with that. Curious. Okay. Do you want a synopsis? I've got a synopsis.
Yeah, go for it.
Well, I've got a brief thing on the back of the doovdy.
Doovdy.
So.
From Brian Bedonde.
Again, with the obscure references. Good Lord. Before Let the Right One In, there was Martin, the original story of teenage angst and vampirism. George A. Romero directs this chilling tale of a tormented youngster with an insatiable appetite for blood. Martin is seemingly your average awkward teen, only he just happens to have a penchant for the blood of nubile women. Suspicious of Martin's nocturnal activities, the lad's uncle decides he must be killed, believing his death will lift an age-old family curse, but he'll have to catch him first. That last... I know, that last line makes it sound fully Scooby-Doo, which is tremendously misleading.
The whole movie is just slapstick caper through Pittsburgh. to
the tune of the Benny Hill music.
Benny Hill for Yakety Sax.
Yakety Sax. That's it. I always forget what it's called.
So, yeah, is this a first watch for you?
No.
Okay, it is for me.
Okay.
To be honest, I didn't think it would be a first watch for you.
Who do you think you're talking to?
You.
Well, quite. First watches are rare. Okay, I am interested then in your take, because traditionally speaking, in terms of stuff we've covered in the past, you haven't been completely or as enamoured as I am with 70s horror. So I'm particularly interested in your take. Did you know much about this before watching it then?
Very little. I knew it was Romero, I knew it was vampires, and that's about the extent of it.
Is it?
Or is it? Yeah, that's the true question of this film.
And the perfect point to say, spoilers!
Yes, we will be delving very much into spoiler territory, guys, so if you don't want it spoiled, go watch the movie, come back, listen to this episode.
If you do want it spoiled, go and get your head felt. Because that's weird. Why would you want it spoiled? That's weird. Anyway. Go on then.
Anyway. You're my opinion of the film now.
Well, no, let's not go straight in there. We need to save something for the finale, don't we? Was it what you expected?
No, I don't think I knew there was that much ambiguity to it.
Okay, you just thought it would be like a straight up vampire movie.
Yeah, well, that's what I've been told. I didn't really.
George does
haven't
vamps.
Haven't really heard much, and given he is known for doing actual zombies, there's no ambiguity really in any of the Dead movies.
Well, no, there's no ambiguity. But he's definitely somebody who sort of takes really familiar, particularly horror movie tropes, and kind of turns them on their head or recontextualizes them is probably a better phrase. So I get what you're saying, but I think to me it makes sense. Like, of course, he's not going to do the obvious thing because, well, yes, you're right. He has kind of done more traditional zombie stuff in terms of like the kind of the shuffling, sleepwalking type zombies. He's always got something to say.
Yes, yeah, that's the thing. Not only is he kind of recontextualizing them and kind of rethinking what he can do with those stories.
Yeah.
There's always been that kind of political, kind of social commentary going on in his work.
Do you know what? It wasn't until I sat down and started making notes for this show. Like, obviously, I recognise Romero as a master. That's not a shock. He's kind of very much earned his place amongst the horror greats. But it wasn't until I really started thinking about his films and how he kind of always has something to say about the times that they were currently living in when he made the films that I was just like, fuck, I miss him more than ever. We need him more than ever now.
I think that's a bit of a double-edged sword, though, because there are some of his films that are kind of have a bit of a more universal, not appeal per se, but like kind of critiquing capitalism. You know, I know that's perhaps more of the remake, but that
no, I don't know.
That. Yeah, would you say so?
I think that was very much present in the original. Yeah, the whole kind of like setting it in a mall, like
yeah, true.
Endless consumerism, even in death.
Like that's quite a prescient topic to cover, and to this day. Whereas I think there are some things that Martin picks up on that are very much of its time.
Okay.
And I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but it does make it a little more difficult to engage with as much if you're not familiar with that era. And because I did kind of read up a bit about that there are kind of like shades of the Vietnam War going on, and
I could see that
in that era.
Yeah.
And obviously that was a very 1970s specific, America specific thing to be dealing with.
I guess so.
And it's hard to. I appreciate that the war doesn't have a huge presence in the film, but it's those sort of things, right? That very much of its time.
I can see that. I think overall it's a very bleak film it
for
definitely just deals in hopelessness and like repeating the past, and you know, it's not necessarily the obvious threat that you want to watch out for.
Yeah,
there's a lot of that.
Yeah. More on that later, I suppose.
Very much so. So obviously the film opens, he's on a train. There are a lot of trains in this movie, way more trains than I remembered there being. And I don't know why that is, but obviously you kind of get a sense for who Martin is quite quickly. Like, he kind of hangs back, he doesn't really talk to anybody, he seems very shy. Instantly kind of develops this fixation or fascination with a woman on the train, follows her, and it's at that point you start kind of having these interspersed black and white scenes, which I'm going to bring up quite a bit because I have things to say. Okay. So apparently George Romero wanted the whole film to be in black and white.
Yes,
but the producers went, no.
And I think it's all the better for it, to be honest.
I think I really, really like the black and white parts that are interspersed, and I think they would have lost. I think that's the thing. I think it would have been. I'm probably backtracking a bit. I think it would have been good in a different way. Yeah, I think that's probably more accurate because the whole black and white thing. You know, it's almost like a kind of a modern day. I mean, it's a modern day vampire movie, right? So if you try and echo the style that was popular during the like 1920s, 30s Hammer horror things, then obviously that will help give the sheen of that sort of era throughout the entire movie, whereas you'd lose the kind of contrast between the modern day and the flashback / dream sequences / whatever they were. So I think it'd be good it'd be good, but just for a different reason. I can see that. I think the black and white scenes are definitely far more striking.
Yes, yeah.
In contrast to the colour.
Not only does it contrast, but even within the frame, like it's all very kind of chiaroscuro, like really harsh shadows, really harsh lights,
super high contrast, and
yeah. Very much here for that sort of thing.
It looks great. And something as well that I immediately noticed that I don't think I picked up on first watch is just the close-ups. Like, there are so many intense, super close-ups. And it makes me feel very uncomfortable. I don't care for it. I think they're filmed very well, and I think it definitely adds something to the film. And I think the intention is to make you uncomfortable. So I'm sure... for that reason, it's successful. But it gave me the heebie-jeebies. Can we still say heebie-jeebies? That feels wrong.
Am
I going to get cancelled?
Is there a history with that one?
I don't know. Maybe I should have Googled it before I used it. Ugh. Anyway, it gives me the creeps. I'll say that.
I think it's fair.
Did it have a similar effect on you, or did you pick up on it at all? Is it something you noticed?
I don't think I did, actually.
Okay, that's interesting, because that's one of the first things that kind of jumped out at me, like the real close-ups of the blade in particular. I
mean, maybe that was more of I didn't pick up on it as such just because of figuring it was more of a style of shooting at the time, you know.
Okay.
Because like 70s and 80s were kind of filled with kind of crash zooms and all these very...
It was a wild time.
Yeah, very kind of like of their time filming techniques that you don't really see as much these days.
More's the pity. It's funny actually, because as much as my love for 80s horror runs very deep, and I'm a huge fan of modern horror as well. I think there's some absolute gems coming out. I think a lot of people are really, really quick to unfairly write off horror that's coming out in the last sort of decade. It's just it's a shit time for... Are you kidding? So much good stuff has come out. We're in a golden age.
And not only that, they're still using horror as a vehicle to tell them, kind of make a point, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Like legacy sequels and reboots and whatever else aside, we are in a golden age for horror. However... I think if I had to choose a decade, it would probably be the 70s. And a lot of what I love is exemplified in this film.
Interesting. I'm curious to hear what those sort of things are.
I mean, not so much like Dutch angles or split diopter in this, but there were, as you say, like the kind of specific filming styles and the close-ups and just wider shots. I mean, I think the thing is, basically, films are so different now. We're kind of spoiled because our attention spans have been altered by smartphones, but also by the media we consume. I mean, I don't think Edgar Wright would have succeeded with his, like, ADHD smash cuts if he'd had to physically splice during the editing process.
Yes, yeah, I think we mentioned that when we talked about... I can't remember what it was. It was we mentioned that in a previous episode or previous minisode, I think.
But like,
because it's such a physical thing to do when you're actually properly editing actual film,
like a real
rather than
laborious
just like
process.
Hitting R on the keyboard and putting a cut on the.
Not that I'm suggesting that digital editing isn't also an art form, but.
No.
I just think it's really interesting, like, the marked differences. Like, there are so many more longer takes and, like, tracking shots and stuff in films that had to be manually edited. And it's not something I really started thinking about until more recently, and now I'm just seeing it everywhere. None of that kind of frenetic editing. And I think stuff was kind of better for it because it had to be a bit better thought out. The framing had to be correct. You couldn't just, like, splice different things together to hide imperfect shots or bad angles. You can't get around it in those ways. And I think we've definitely lost something.
Probably, but I think we've gained things as well. I think it's just different.
Yeah, for sure.
Because you're right, like, you know, that kind of... There was an artistry because it was a very physical thing. I mean, it's almost like the difference between painting on a canvas and painting in Photoshop, right?
Oh yeah, you still have to have an immense amount of skill.
Yeah, but digital art affords you more flexibility, more more kind of chance for creativeness, I suppose. I think there's
it saves you an absolute fortune in Tipex as well.
Yes, that's true. but you think about, I mean, maybe it's more to do with access to education, but and access to tools. But you think about all these painters that were renowned for, like, being able to draw or paint photorealistically, and they're kind of almost like a dime a dozen these days. Like illustrators that can draw photorealistically, and again, not knocking it, but
I guess the barrier to entry for all of that stuff has definitely come down. Because I get the impression back when people were kind of commissioning portraits of their families from the best artist in the land, like it was only really something that higher classes could probably access, I guess. But now anybody can sort of save up and buy an entry-level tablet and away they go.
Yeah.
And, you know, endless tutorials on YouTube. You didn't have to travel to get the information, you know. So
and you've got all the different tools that programs like Photoshop can provide, and they just allow you the chance to do art that, you know, traditional pen and paper or paint and canvas might not be able to. And again, it's just different. That's all I'm saying, right? I'm not saying one is better than the other. Yes, there's something to be said for physically editing, the artistry of physically editing film together, but also at the same time, digital editing is a whole other thing that I guess you just can't compare them. That's what I'm getting at.
No, I agree with that. I think maybe one thing I will say is for manual editing and filmmakers back then, you had to really fucking want to do it. It wasn't really something you fell into.
Yeah. For sure.
Whereas now, you know, everybody who owns an iPhone can make a movie. And does sometimes.
And
And, you know, just because you can, that's all I'm going to say. But yeah, going back to that opening scene on the train, how do you feel about that in terms of establishing the film itself? Because I have a differing opinion that's not mine.
You have an opinion that isn't okay.
I have a second-hand opinion that I would like to offer
in this trying time. I think he does a really good job of establishing Martin. I think he is a man kind of full of conflict throughout in various different ways, because on one hand is he a vampire? Is he just, ill? Is he...
Ding, ding, ding.
Is he a killer? Is he... he's simultaneously a killer and also quite sensitive and...
Oh, he's also
caring.
A sex pest. Let's not forget
that. Too. Yeah.
Which makes me very uneasy, because I feel like the film does encourage you to sympathise with him at multiple points.
But then if for example, he is romanticising traditional Gothic vampires, then that stands to reason, right?
Mm.
And what it's doing is perhaps holding a mirror up to that, the idea of what vampires...
Oh, the fact that we've romanticised these things that compel women to do unspeakable things. And
like, just because they're using hypnosis or whatever doesn't make it any less horrifying.
No. It's still a bit rapey. But yeah, I found that really interesting this time around, because I think on first watch, much like you, I was expecting more of a traditional vampire film. And I think very quickly you find out that this is not that. Because, I mean, in that in that opening, you kind of see he can go out in daylight, he can see his reflection in a mirror, and then when he gets to, is it Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania?
I think so, yeah.
Somewhere with trains. He's not affected by garlic or crosses or any of the religious epithets. Yeah. So I do think that's interesting that it sort of flips it on its head very early on. And it's just like, oh, you thought this was going to be your grandma's vampire film? No. We're modern here. Also, can I just say, I'm a big fan of 70s fashion.
Yeah.
You have no idea how thrilled I was when flares came back in fashion this year. And corduroy. I'm living the dream right now.
Amazing. So what did you think of that opening scene then? What was the second-hand opinion then?
So I personally liked it. I think it was brilliant in terms of quite succinctly setting the scene and introducing the principal character, and how conflicted we're supposed to be as an audience of like, oh my God, he's done this terrible thing, but he seems so nice. I think that's great. However, I watched it with my partner, and we talked a little bit after the film was over, and he said he would have preferred it if they'd done away with that, and it had just started with him arriving in Pittsburgh with Tate Kuda?
Yeah, sure. Colonel Sanders.
Lithuanian Colonel Sanders. Yes, I made that note too. It was the white suit that did it. But yeah, if it just sort of opened on that, like cold open... because you don't get a huge amount of exposition straight off the bat, which I love, but you kind of get the exposition peppered throughout via different conversations, primarily with Tate Kuda, and also I've forgotten her name,
Christine.
Their cousin.
Christina?
Was she actually
Christina?
She's called Christine in real life. Is that her character name as well?
Oh no, you've made me second guess it now. I thought it was.
Fun fact.
I was like, I'm going to write down this name, and then...
she was George Romero's wife for quite a long time.
Okay, yeah, she's called Christina.
Christina, okay. She's called Christine in real life. She met Stephen King before he wrote Christine, and he borrowed the name off her because he liked it so much.
That's quite a presence in horror.
Yeah, I'm so honoured you named a murderous car after me. I mean, I would take it.
I think that's fair, though. I think, like, it would certainly keep the ambiguity. I think the thing is, and this is what I've been trying to work out. Like, I think it flips the question a bit, because had it cold opened, even if you found out, like, just as they got to the station that there was a murder on the the train and Martin was just walking away, you'd always have the ambiguity of whether he did it or not. However, I think the ambiguity comes because you see it happening. The ambiguity comes more from:
is he mentally ill or is he a vampire?
Yeah, or how Romero is even defining what a vampire is.
True. Okay.
Because certainly there's nothing necessarily supernatural about Martin himself.
No, definitely
you
not.
don't see anything.
He's not.
Just a
he
guy.
Doesn't have any sort of like superhuman strength or
So
he struggles.
If you're looking at like the Bram Stoker style Dracula, then he's just a dude. But if Romero's saying, well, actually, my vampires are just thirst for blood, then that's perhaps where where the ambiguity is found, because it's more about how he's defining vampires rather than
interesting.
Rather than kind of kicking the can down the road about whether Martin is a vampire or not.
Okay.
If you get what I mean.
I think so. I do definitely want to talk about the is he or isn't he when we get towards the end of the show, because I went back and forth on that so much. But I know where I've landed now.
I think I know, but I'm sure I will say something and you'll go, what about this? And I'll go, yes, I didn't think of that.
We'll see. But yeah, kind of the setup with Tate Kudo when he gets to Pittsburgh, you kind of immediately find out, well, not immediately, it's all a little bit vague to begin with, but you soon find out that he's kind of a more distant relative. He's there because Tate Kudo knows, in inverted quotes, that he's a vampire and he wants to save his soul or kill him. Or save his soul and then kill him. Who knows?
Is it? I think it's there. He does say then. Yeah. Because it's quite like within like an hour or two of meeting him, he's already talking about destroying him.
Yeah.
Okay, fine.
Like, fucking chill, Mr. Right? Kudo, if that is in fact your real name. Zero chill, that man. And he kind of settles in quite quickly. Like, he's very shy, but he settles in. He kind of befriends his cousin. You get the impression he'd never met before.
Despite the fact that it was forbidden, he was told not to. He was told to not converse.
Yeah, but I mean, he doesn't do a great deal of talking, so he more or less sticks to it.
Yeah.
But yeah, he kind of he warms a little bit, and they have that dinner where he's kind of cracking jokes and using the weird little mini guillotine thing.
Yeah.
And he seems quite warm. And it's those moments where I'm like, I come unstuck a bit because I'm like, oh, he's so nice. He's just shy.
Yeah. Well, like that scene particularly, now that you mention it, kind of portrays him in a very childlike manner.
Yeah, like he's stunted. If he is 84.
Yeah. The kid who's just like pulled a Christmas cracker and got some toy in it and is just wanting to show it off to all the adults around the table, you know?
Yeah. Like, yeah, there's definitely a childlike glee about it. It's just a bit of a cheeky jokester. That's all.
Which is interesting because obviously that's not what Romero intended at first. He originally wrote it as if it was a vampire, a traditional vampire living in modern day. And it was only when he came across
John Amplas?
John Amplas that he...
I could see, I saw your screen light up in your glasses and I knew you were Googling something.
Don't ruin the mystery. Don't ruin the illusion, Sarah. I know what I'm talking about. But it wasn't until he actually met John that he rewrote who Martin was.
That's really cool.
So
that's really cool.
He must have brought that quite like childlike naivety to the role, or at least because he didn't audition for it. I think he saw John somewhere else, and I can't remember exactly what it was. But
you there, be in my film. I like to think that's how it went down. So the guy who played Martin actually teaches acting, or did.
Really?
Yeah, which I thought was really cool. He didn't do a great deal of acting after this. He did some. I believe he was in at least one other of Romero's films. I want to say Day of the Dead.
Yeah, I was about to say he was in one of the Deads.
Yeah. I mean, it's a safe bet. If you can't remember any of Romero's films, just take a wild guess. Something of the Dead? She's Greater of the Dead? That's it. Close. But yeah, when he meets Tate Kuda and he kind of gives this very dramatic spiel, the thing that kind of occurred to me is that Tate Kuda is supposed to be the guy who's, like, yes, believes in magic, as they keep calling it, but is also very grounded in religion and the real world. But he is far more in keeping with a traditional vampire story than the supposed vampire.
Like proper fire and brimstone. You know, he's the guy that'll be leading the charge up with like.
He would have the torch. Yeah, absolutely.
To the castle, yeah,
he'd be head of the mob.
And the fact that he's kind of Lithuanian, has like Eastern European accent as well. It's very evocative of like a Transylvanian castle. You know. Absolutely.
But I did really enjoy that kind of the flipping of like, well, he's the vampire, but he's not what I expect. But that guy is. But I'm supposed to like him because he's on the side of right. Oh, I'm confused. And I think that was kind of genius. Whether or not Romero intended that from the outset, I think, you know, what happened was kind of perfect. But yeah, the whole setup does seem a little bit strange at first, because I remember the first time I watched it, I was just like, is this some sort of vampire Make-A-Wish? Like, what's happening here? Oh no, he's going to kill him. Uh-oh. Like, it's not immediately obvious. And I kind of respect that about films that they kind of drip feed you the information. They don't give you a big exposition spoon straight away. I think too many modern films give you all of the information and too much of it too soon. Whereas I prefer to kind of learn things as you go along. I like there to be a little bit of mystery. I enjoy confusion. I don't always need to know what's going on.
There's something rewarding about putting the pieces together yourself and not being like, or even missing things and then going back and rewatching and thinking, oh yeah, that actually makes sense now that I know how this film ends.
Yeah. Oh my God.
I think that's...
We'll talk about the ending later.
You lose that if there's a big kind of like montage at the end where all the kind of pieces fit together. You get a flashback of all these moments that piece together and the big revelation happens. There's none of that mystery. There's none of that rewatchability, because what's the point? You know what you're going to be seeing, right? You're not going to be you know what you're going to be shown.
Yes, absolutely. So I want to talk a little bit about, I don't know how best to describe them. The interactions that Martin has with his chosen victims. He's obviously got a pattern where he kind of observes people and then picks somebody out and then kind of, I don't know, follows them home, or, you know, that happens a couple times in this. So that's clearly something and he even talks about it, especially when he's talking to the radio announcer towards the end of the film, which is another thing I really enjoyed. Like, he's kind of, it could be complete delusion, but he's in a religious kind of, I don't know what the word is, mirroring. Like, he's basically using the guy, the radio DJ, as a confessional.
Yeah.
Which I thought was quite an interesting touch. But yeah, so the interactions between his chosen victims, with specific reference to the women, because obviously he does kill a couple of men, but I want to talk about the women, because obviously we've talked a bit about, he's not a traditional vampire. He's not, like, most vampires are kind of theatrical and confident and can compel people to do things and have powers. And he's just like a sullen little teenager who barely says boo to a goose. But it seems to me like the interactions he has with these women, it's not just about exsanguination. It's as much about the intimacy. Which I think is something that kind of, to my mind, lends a bit more credence to the he's delusional theory. Also, was Martin the first ever incel? Just saying.
Interesting.
But yeah, it's like he's lacking intimacy in his real life because he's not confident enough to approach these women in daylight. He claims to have a thirst for blood. Then why does he sort of take time to undress them? And it's never shown, it's never explicitly stated, but I guess the suggestion is that he kind of molests them at the very least.
Yeah, but then you think about...
He's a sex criminal.
Yeah.
Like,
not in the way we talked about in the minisode.
No, unambiguously.
Yeah, I think it's... But then you look at the portrayal of kind of traditional vampires as being very seductive and, like you say, charismatic. You know, it all tracks because there is that element of lust in there, and as well as the actual first blood. And it, you know, ultimately his toolkit is just emulating the best way he can what a vampire would do. He's got drugs to act as like the hypnosis, perhaps.
Look, he's Dexter without the what do you call it? Saran wrap. Why can't I brain today? What do you call it?
Tarpaulin?
No. Saran wrap. I'm just going to keep saying it. Cling film. Oh my God, yes. He's Dexter without the gloves and the cling film. But they didn't have DNA back then, did they? I mean, everybody had DNA. I got there before you did. Don't make me sound dumb.
But I think that's the thing, like, it's not... like a vampire, if he is delusional and caught up in like the mythos of vampires and has convinced himself that he is one, then it stands to reason that he is going to be, there is the element of lust and intimacy as well as the ultimate, because it's, you know, like the Bride of Dracula is a thing, right?
Yeah, I guess so. I have a slightly alternate theory that I would like to offer regarding that in a little bit. But I'm going to leave you waiting for now. So he kind of starts helping out in Tate Kuda's store.
Yep.
I'm baffled as to why there was a queue outside. Like, it looked like Black Friday. What the fuck?
I know, right? It was super busy and they were just waiting for him to open up so they could flood in. And
it's like the next Boxing Day sale. Oh God, that ages me. But yeah, so he starts kind of working there and like delivering to people in the neighborhood. And that's where he meets somebody that he is able to have an actual relationship with, sans drugging her. How do you feel about that? Because it's quite touching in some regards, but then really weird in others, because I have very mixed feelings. Like, she's a much older married woman. They never kind of state how old he's supposed to be, besides 84. But even the back of the DVD refers to him as a teenager.
Yeah.
So, like, it's weirdly predatory on her part, and it's almost like turning the tables a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, that's a fair point. Again, you know, flipping the vampire myth on its head. Older vampire takes a younger bride.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I haven't thought of that. It's interesting because it's two kind of lost people who have found each other. Yeah. And there is an element of like sweetness to it, I suppose. But
in a lot of ways, yes. I mean, he does seem to care about her, and I don't know how much she seems to care about him. She seems to relish the distraction from her miserable life. But there does seem to be a genuine connection there. We don't get to see an awful lot of it, though, is my only real complaint. I think it would have been nice if they'd explored that a little bit more.
Well, this is the interesting thing, isn't it? Because certainly the version I watched was an hour and a half long.
Oh my God, the original cut, man.
Was 2 hours 45 minutes. There's practically an entire other movie that we haven't seen.
Well, apparently there was supposed to be a lot of narration from Martin himself, which I'm really glad they got rid of.
Okay.
I'm not a huge fan of narration, unless it's used sparingly. But yeah, it was never screened in its original uncut form, and it was thought to be lost. But apparently and I didn't realise this was a thing, but like Romero kind of historians, archivists, scholars, I don't know, discovered it. I don't know if it's been screened to this day, but it has been found. It exists. Yeah. I would watch it.
I would be curious what it bought. I think I would have liked more, but I feel
not that much more.
Not that much more. Yeah. 2 hours 45 minutes is too much more.
Yeah, 2 hours would be nice. I'd watch a 2-hour cut.
Yeah, bit more kind of backstory, bit more kind of character study, character development.
Yeah. Okay, I agree with that.
And that's actually saying something because it's quite a slow film as well.
I don't think it is. It's so weird. Dan said the same thing. I feel like it takes a little bit of time, like besides the opening, I think it takes a little bit of time to really kind of get going. But I think once it gets going, it's quite, not action-packed, but like, I don't find it slow. Okay. It's kind of like, it's a little bit dreamlike in that way that a lot of 70s horrors were.
Maybe that's more what I mean. It's a bit more, not aimless, but meandering, I suppose.
Okay.
Yes. And I feel another kind of half an hour, whatever, would have exacerbated that,
That's fair. I would happily watch a 2-hour cut, but it's not for everyone. I do think we should create a drinking game around this film. I think we should take a shot every time somebody says Nosferatu. You might make it 20 minutes in. Yeah, that's his favourite word.
Which is interesting because it does evoke a different sort of vampire. Because you think about Count Dracula,
a traditional one,
Bram Stoker Gothic Dracula. That's perhaps what, and that's maybe another discrepancy, or at least another kind of way they flipped on its head, because Martin sees himself, or potentially could see himself, as the Gothic vampire, the Count Dracula, the Bram Stoker style Dracula, whereas his uncle sees him more as a Nosferatu type, like a monstrous creature, that has nothing other than a thirst for blood about him,
That's interesting. I think now is probably a good time, because I've teased it enough and we just keep coming back to it. So I'm just going to ask you, do you think he's a vampire, or do you think he's mentally ill?
I think he is mentally ill.
I also think he's mentally ill.
Yeah. I think there's just very little evidence. Unless Romero has really been very specific about how he's defining a vampire in his movie. Mm-hmm. There's just very little evidence other than kind of these kind of flashbacks or dream sequences, and even then, there's no evidence that they're perhaps. But then,
So this is probably the first thing that sort of tipped me off that it might not be quite a straight up vampire story, because littered through it are scenes that you are intended to think are flashbacks. They're done in black and white. He looks younger, he's dressed differently, it's clearly a different time, a different place. It
almost
suggests,
like a different film, because it is black and white, it's shot differently, it's filmed differently.
Yeah, but there's the definite suggestion that it happened a long time ago, and he's kind of recalling what happened. But then there are other black and white scenes. Like the first time we see the black and white scenes interspersed is right at the start when he's on the train. He busts into that woman's room. He kind of sees this vision in black and white of this beautiful woman waiting for him, just waiting to be taken. But the reality is that she's got a face mask on and she's blowing her nose, and it's not something that happened. It's a delusion of his. And it makes me wonder if, therefore, all of the black and white scenes are supposed to be not necessarily memories, but absolute delusions on his part.
Him romanticizing it.
Absolutely romanticizing it,
yeah.
Yeah.
Because even the kind of the storming the castle scenes are all very tragic anti-hero sort of.
Oh, yeah. It's very literary Gothic type stuff. But again, that kind of is backed up by the way that Tate Kuda talks about the family curse, the family shame. mental illness is often referred to as that. Is often hereditary, genetic. There is a genetic component to a lot of mental illness. So it all kind of tracks as far as I'm concerned, particularly on a second watch when I was thinking about it a lot more. And the way that Tate Kuda talks about vampirism is very kind of Bram Stoker. So maybe the fact that he and his other family members have kind of foisted this onto their cursed family members, their cursed relatives, so-called. That. Yeah, maybe he's sort of taking that on board, and it's a case of like nature versus nurture. Like the family members have made him that way. Who knows?
Yeah, I mean that would be my take. I think there's just like, I think that's perhaps why it's so effective that Romero did. And it's just there's not a lot of evidence to show that he is a vampire other than his thirst for blood, which you don't even know if that's a real like thing or not. There's
no. Like he could have convinced himself.
There's no scenes of him wasting away without blood.
No.
You know, it almost seems quite black and white in a way.
Yeah. I do love the fact that Romero does kind of intentionally leave it ambiguous, though. There's no clear answer, which I enjoy. Question, asking for a friend. Medically speaking, could a person actually imbibe human blood in excess and like not get sick?
I don't know. I would imagine not.
Well, that's something else I was thinking. Like, I don't know. Perhaps the delusion is so strong that he's convinced himself he can, or maybe he doesn't drink as much of it as, you know. We don't see that happen very often. He's not like glugging it down, is he?
Like a pint of blood.
Yeah.
On the side.
Gross.
Or, sorry, red paint, as it looks like.
Oh, fuck off. I love that 70s Giallo red blood. You know I do.
I know.
I love it. I'm here for it. Oh, speaking of, I do really enjoy the score for this movie. I think it's really haunting. But I did find out that there is an Italian dub where Goblin did the score.
And now you want to see that.
And now I must see that.
I think, but I actually picked up on this. Again, that kind of like duality is picked up on because, and it may have just been a symptom of when the film was released. But part of the film is kind of synthy and kind of electronic, but then part of it is quite strings and more traditional orchestral, and that in itself shows that kind of duality between the traditional vampire, like the haunted castle thing, and
I like that.
The kind of modern day film that it's actually the reality of the film, as it were.
Yeah. That hadn't occurred to me, but I really, really like that. I hope that was intentional.
Again, you know, I think that's not necessarily, you know, it's something I've picked up on because I think I remember picking up on it when we did Cannibal Holocaust. I think that had
I genuinely love the Cannibal Holocaust music. I think it's great.
I seem to remember it veering kind of between quite flowery, pretty strings and synth, you know, and that is, it may just be of its time, but, you know.
Perhaps. I do like that theory, though. I don't know. I think, I mean, besides Night of the Living Dead, Romero hadn't really had any commercial success at this point in his career, but I still think he was kind of a master of his craft.
I think he was even massively in debt when...
He was $1 million in debt when they made this.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, what did he do? Night of the Living Dead was 1968, I want to say. So after that, he did Season of the Witch, The Crazies, I think, was 1973. Then this was 1977. Very good year for horror, might I say. This and Suspiria, spoiled.
There you go.
But yeah, so nobody really wanted to take a punt on him, and he kind of teamed up with the producer, I forget his name, something Rubenstein, who kind of agreed to help him try and pay the people he was in debt to back. They made this. It was not a commercial success, but then obviously a year later, he went on to make Dawn of the Dead, which was financially and critically well received. And yeah, his career was back on track. So kind of crazy.
It is, yeah, him. And it goes to show a bit of perseverance.
Yeah, and just somebody who believes in you. That's all it takes. Yeah, I did. It's funny you talked about the Vietnam War. I think there was some kind of. I might be reading too much into this, but I thought a couple of different points that there might be kind of some subtle comments about racism.
Well, yeah, like the police brutality
against the black people, horrendous. But also like the scenes where he's kind of loitering outside the supermarket trying to find a victim. And like there are these kind of younger black kids who are sort of not harassing, but just like, just kind of like hassling this woman as she's getting to her car and she looks terrified. And then you just see Martin hanging back and it's like, no, it's the innocuous white boy, that one you want to worry about. Yeah. He's the menace. These guys are fine. They're just gobshites. But I thought that was quite again, no idea if that was intentional, but he has commented on racism before. He's been a filmmaker who has continually put black actors at the forefront of his films. Yeah. I think even when it was very controversial to do so.
Yeah, and that I think is telling because he's clearly had trying to be anti-racist on his mind. He's trying to push boundaries and try and do things that other filmmakers aren't prepared to. And to have a film that is seemingly obviously trying to demonize some people while the secret villain of the whole thing is just this, like you say, innocuous white guy.
Yeah, just this shy kid that everyone thinks is, isn't he nice?
And like you say, that even just the drug raid scene with the police, the kind of police brutality of that scene, again, not who you'd expect, No. I really did enjoy the scene towards the end where Martin's kind of trying to hastily clean up a crime scene. And the police are sort of, he's broken into the thrift store and he's trying to kind of ditch his blood-soaked clothes and put new ones on. And the police are sort of, rapidly on their way. I really liked how that was intercut with the actual sort of torch-wielding mob scenes in black and white. Thought that was really nicely done. But again, that really stuff like that really cements, and I think I need to rewatch it with that in mind. Rewatch it to try and contextualize everything. But that cements the idea of him seeing himself as this tragic villain or a tragic hero, maybe anti-hero, whatever. And the angry mob are baying at the doors. Even if it's the police, he still sees himself as persecuted by these people.
That's, I think, again, why it kind of supports the idea that he's mentally ill, though. Maybe he does literally see himself as a victim and he's been kind of forced into this one way or another, through suggestion or feeling like he's sort of got to fit a box that other people have put him into. I don't know. Did you know that this film was, I can't remember if it was, I think it was seized and confiscated. So I believe banned during the video nasty panic in the UK.
I did, and stuff like that always surprises me a bit because I'm like...
Because it's so tame.
It's so tame, but then you kind of think about it, you think, I guess. That's probably, there was the kind of razor scene at the start was, I think it was potentially going to get the film an X rating.
Okay.
And it wasn't the content, it was the actual length of the shots.
Oh, interesting.
And so they really had to kind of like cut that shot down and keep it short to try and make it an actual releasable film.
That's really interesting because I read that scene, like they fucked up initially. That scene is longer than it should be because that first shot, they don't cut the fake arm deep enough. So then obviously you see them going back in. I think it's great. I think it sort of adds to the sort of naturalistic element of the film really nicely. But it's curious that they left that longer scene in when they had to cut some of it out. That's
I
interesting.
think it's a good choice though, because it, accident or otherwise, it again shows Martin in not a sympathetic light, but it shows that he's not skilled. He's not. Yeah. He's clumsy. He's doesn't really know what he's doing. He's trying his best. Yeah.
Like even the sort of the kit that he has with the sedatives and all of that stuff. He even talks about having honed that over a lengthy period of time. So there were probably a lot of fuck-ups before he got there. So I think now's probably a good time to talk about his lady friend. Obviously, we didn't see enough of that relationship, I don't think. And it seems to happen very quickly. Like, they're kind of getting it on, and then all of a sudden he goes to her house and she's slit her wrists in the bathtub. How did you feel about that? Because it kind of comes out of left field, I think. I appreciate it on thinking about it, because I think the fact that he kind of, the first woman we see him kill, he stages the scene to look like a suicide. So in some respects, the only person he cares about having killed herself is kind of, it's a shit thing to say because she was a human being with agency, but like, it's almost poetic justice for him having done that to other people. Kind of
mirroring that you kind of see throughout the film. Interesting, because I didn't, obviously having not seen this film before, it was quite out of left field.
Yeah, it seems to happen all of a sudden.
Yeah, I think I'd want to go back. I mean, I sound like I'm sitting on the fence. It's one of those things where it almost didn't register, but it just kind of happened. And I was a bit like, okay, that's fine, and I having, if I'd go back and take a look, it might be that I'd be more primed to pick up on any clues that might be being dropped throughout,
Yeah, I mean, she was clearly depressed. If any. She was clearly a very depressed individual, but there wasn't enough there. This is, I think, why I would have liked to see more of her and more of their relationship, because it's sort of suggested, but there's not enough to kind of lead you there. And I do wonder if, in light of obviously the information that it was banned at one point, or at least seized by the authorities, whether or not they had to really trim that, because there was quite a lot of fake blood, I guess, compared to the rest of the film.
Yeah, true.
I wish though you don't see the act.
I wish I'd found out why it was, what particular issue they had with the film.
Yeah, because I mean, nobody's looking at that lurid red blood and going, "Oh yeah, that's real."
Yeah.
Are they? Even in the 70s? Who hasn't cut themselves?
Yeah. That's always the thing, that it's really hard to understand outside of the context of that era, because with visual effects, both prosthetic and like physical and visual effects, the way they are now, it's really hard to look at that and think, oh, I can see why this is an issue. Like, it just things look fake. Things don't look real because they just look like prosthetics, which they are. It's
funny because in my research for this film, like, a lot of people really praise Tom Savini's practical effects. And look, I'm going to hold my hands up and just admit that I'm a massive Philistine. Am I being unfair? I thought they looked pony for the most part.
Yeah, I nothing jumped out as being. No, I'm in agreement, but then it's really hard to.
But I guess we don't know what was cut as well.
Yeah,
maybe there would have been a lot more.
It's just hard to remove yourself from the context of modern day effects.
I think even within the context of that time period, though, I'm guessing the budget was pretty low.
You're more familiar with the era than I am, so.
Yeah, I mean, I think they were kind of like, they were on a par with films of that budget from that era, and they weren't awful, but it's curious to me that people praise them specifically, and I wonder if it's just because it is Tom Savini and people are just like, oh, he's the effects master, of course it's great. I don't know.
Yeah,
maybe I'm being mean. Also, I don't like it when he doesn't have a mustache.
Did you recognise him?
I did recognise him immediately, but I do not care for Tom Savini pre-mustache. Don't like it. What do we think about the director cameo?
I wasn't aware of it until after the fact.
Okay.
I know makes me feel. I feel awful saying it, but I'm so again. It's one of those things where you become aware of things in the present day.
Yeah, like, he looked a world away from the
has a bunch of white hair and big square glasses, and that's Romero, right? So seeing a younger version wouldn't have registered.
Low key, really good though. I usually cringe when directors have cameos in their own movies, but he was great.
Yeah. I do appreciate the attention to detail as well, because I know the Latin chants they used were authentic.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
I know that the chapel that they were in was a real chapel that had actually been fire damaged.
Oh, wow.
So that was genuine location.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm kind of getting to the end of my notes, Phil. Do you have anything more that you would like to say about this?
I think and it's sort of something I often do. I struggle finding my thoughts until I've spoken to you. So with certain films, I'm
You're welcome.
How do I feel about this movie? Yeah, because I've seen it being hailed a masterpiece. It's certainly Romero's personal favourite of the ones he's done.
It gets called, what's the word? Under-recognised, under-seen.
Yeah, underappreciated, yeah. Which I think is fair, because people hear Romero, they think zombies,
Yeah, for sure.
So I think that's fair, but having spoken about it, having discussed it with you and looked into it as well, I think I appreciated it far more than I did when I was watching it.
Okay. Has it made you want to give it a second go and maybe?
Yeah, because there are a bunch of things that, like you say, get recontextualized once you know what's going on.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think going back and watching it would help bring these things to light. I would, and it's just my personal opinions here, I would have liked to have seen more of that kind of Gothic castle black and white footage in the film, because I'm just a sucker for those sort of things.
Your thing, isn't it?
That is my thing.
Maybe Guillermo del Toro will remake it one day.
Don't.
Doug Jones can play Tartakudo.
And Martin.
And Martin. And
Christina.
Yeah.
But no, I do really appreciate this movie. And like I said, it took a bit of thinking, took a bit of percolating, but because again, it's so ambiguous that you kind of left you're left feeling a bit ambiguously about it. But I do really enjoy it. I'd like to watch it again to see how the film changes, knowing what I know now.
That's really
I did
cool.
did really enjoy it. What about you? Why do you not want to talk about it ever again?
Just because it's been taxing. The first time I watched it, I had kind of the same experience that you did. I knew it was a good film, but in doing research before watching it a second time, everybody raved about it, and I was just like, oh god, maybe I'm misremembering. Maybe it's better than I. But yeah, almost identical experience to you on first watch. I'm really, really happy we covered it. I think people are right when they say it is kind of low-key a masterpiece, and it's definitely like a diamond in the rough amongst George Romero's back catalogue. I think it is a little bit rough around the edges in places, and I think some of that is budget. I would like to see a better transfer. I've got the Arrow release, and the transfer, I mean, it's different. It's difficult when things are made on film, but knowing how much things can be cleaned up and crisped up, I would like to see a better transfer of it. I think that would be nice. But I think it's really well made. I think that ending is such a genius sucker punch. Like I remember watching that the first time and I felt like I'd been staked in the chest because it just like, it happens, isn't it? Yeah, well, it is this kind of meandering film, like you say, and it's kind of woozy and dreamlike, and it's got this weird 70s quality about it, and then just like, bam. Oh, fuck. That just happened.
But that's kind of the genius, because how else does it end? How else does the vampire film end, right? That's how vampire films end. The vampire gets staked through the heart. Just because he's our protagonist doesn't mean that changes anything. Yeah, and just because, despite him being a despicable human being, we might feel some iota of sympathy based on how he's presented, it's still kind of course that had to happen, but it's like jarring. Because we've spent the entire film with him. He's in almost every scene. And I thought that was brilliant. And Tate Kuda just kind of being like, I can't remember his exact phrase, but like, your soul's damned. Like, shit. Because I think it's at that point he figures that Martin killed the only person he didn't kill. Yes, yeah. But I think that's part of what makes that act kind of poetic justice for him. Yeah. Because, you had it coming, mate. Yeah, I like this film a lot. I'm sorry if this offends people called Martin. I think Martin's a really dweeby name. And I don't care for it. But I think it's kind of perfect. He's a Martin. He's such a Martin. I think that's probably one reason that people don't seek this film out much more, because a film called Martin doesn't give you anything. It could be anything. Like Dawn of the Dead, sure. The Crazy, sure. Like, basically any other of Romero's films, you can look at that and go, I know what that film's about just by the title. Martin, that could be about a dog. Who knows? Could be some Lassie knockoff. A dog that leads people to victims of vampirism. I don't know. I'd watch that. I'm not going to lie. Of course you would. It's got a dog in it. Martin too. I'm really glad that we got around to this at long last, and I'm happy that we got to dive into it. I like these deep dives. For sure. I'm happy you enjoyed it, and I'm happy I was able to help form your opinion. It's what I use these for. Like, anytime I'm like, I don't know how I feel about this film, I'll just like come on and chat with you about it, and then by the end of the episode I'll be like, yeah, no, I know how I feel now. But yeah, thank you for kind of helping me decide how I feel. And of course, thank you to Ali as well, because without him, excellent suggestion. It's an excellent choice. Yeah. And of course, guys, if any of you want to take part in any suggestions you may have, we do have a private Discord on our Patreon where you can access all of our mini-sodes. We have upwards of 70-ish now, I think. Oh, way more than ridiculous. That. Is it more than that? I can't remember. I can't remember. We have lots. But 70 plus. It's like $2 a month. It's nothing. I reckon there's about 80 hours of content there. A fair amount, isn't there, all told? Yeah. For £2 a month. You could, do you know what? You could sign up for £2, listen to all 80 hours and then ditch it, and we've still got you £2. It's fine. Don't give them ideas, Sarah. But we would like it if you stuck around and became part of the community, because our community is the goddamn best. Yes, that is also true. That is very true. So yeah, until next time, stay spooky. You better stay spooky. I mean it. Stay spooky.